We have reporters and analysts covering every angle. NBC's Gary Grumbach is in Altoona, Pennsylvania. Former Assistant Manhattan District Attorney Catherine Christian and former FBI Special Agent Clint Watts are also with us. Gary Mangione being held there in Altoona this morning. What more are we learning about his arrest and the evidence police there found when they took him into custody?
Yeah, Anna, 5 days after investigators used drones and canines and scuba divers trying to find evidence to find the suspect, it all came down to good old-fashioned see something, say something. And that's what happened at the McDonald's in Altoona when a patron saw somebody suspicious in the corner of the restaurant, notified an employee that worked there. That employee then recognized him from the photos that have been circulating and called law enforcement. The NYPD said this morning that that particular man, Luigi, was not even on the law enforcement's radar until that phone call happened. Now, according to court documents, when Altoona police showed up and started questioning him about whether he'd been to New York recently, he started shaking and getting visibly agitated. Our team spoke this morning with somebody who was at the McDonald's when this all went down. Here's what he had to say.
The guy came in the door, and I didn't really look at him. I thought it was everyone was kidding around. The one guy said, "That looks like the shooter from New York." And, oh my God, they arrested this guy at McDonald's. So then I came back and I said to the one worker, I said, "Was that here?" And they said, "Yeah." And I said, "Was I here?" They said, "Yeah, you were sitting over there."
Now, investigators found several things in Luigi Mangione's backpack that will no doubt lead to discussions of possible motive as we get to that point. He had $8,000 in cash, including foreign currency. He had 3 pages of writings, general distaste of the healthcare industry, quotes that included, quote, "Frankly, these parasites had it coming," and, quote, "I do apologize for any strife or traumas, but it had to be done." He also stated that he acted alone. He also had a weapon on him, but it's unclear if that's the same weapon that was used in the murder of the healthcare CEO. The suspect, as you mentioned, is now sitting in maximum security in a state penitentiary about a half an hour outside of Altoona. Ana?
Gary Grumbach, thank you for that reporting. So, Catherine, talk to us about the process now of getting him from Pennsylvania to New York to face this murder charge.
The process actually isn't very cumbersome. Assuming that he doesn't agree to come back on his own, which often they don't, then the Manhattan DA's office will file what's called a governor's warrant. We'll seek a governor's warrant. So Governor Hochul, the governor of New York, will ask the governor of Pennsylvania, Shapiro, to send him back. And the process has already started. As soon as they filed the criminal court complaint, arrest warrant, charging murder in the second degree, that allows them to prepare the paperwork for both states to sign off on and bring him back. It also gives them enough time to get the case together to present to the grand jury. So in many ways, it's a gift that they have this little bit of time now.
We're talking more about the evidence. Of course, Gary talked about these writings. We've learned a little bit about the gun that police say was a ghost gun. We also have understood they recovered multiple fake IDs, including one with the name Mark Rosario, which happened to be the same name or same potentially ID that he used when he checked into the hostel here in New York City. Clint, how strong is this evidence, and what does it tell you about potential planning that went into all of this?
What's very strange about this is the remarkable amount of planning that this individual put into this shooting, and then up to a point, it just stopped. That he still had the weapon on him, that he still had the fake ID on him. This all essentially ties him right back to the crime scene. If that physical evidence wasn't there, it would really change it. The other part is he's not trying to evade, his connection to it. He has a manifesto there. He talks very specifically about his plot. So kind of a strange twist is he did all these things to hide his actions up to the event of it and even to do the egress. Then at a certain point, he just stopped. And now all that evidence ties him back to the shooting.
And Catherine, we're learning more about the background of Luigi Mangione. We found out he graduated from an all-male high school in Baltimore. It was the Gilman School. He graduated with multiple degrees from the University of Pennsylvania. What are police and prosecutors doing right now as far as digging into that background and building their case?
They're going through every part of his life. So the DAs, the investigative analysts, the investigators, the detectives, his social media presence, and apparently has. They recovered devices from a laptop and other devices. They're getting search warrants to go into those devices and any information he has on the cloud. Now that he's been identified, they're going to trace all of his steps before he allegedly committed this shooting and talk to anyone who saw him, his movements, everything. So he appears not to be, the blue-collar dad with a sick child. He appears to be a wealthy, privileged young man. So I sense, and he hasn't have an attorney yet here, that there'll be some type of mental health defense because it makes no sense.
Our Tom Winter is also here with us. Tom, you've been reporting on this story since it broke last week, and I know you've been looking into some of his digital footprint as part of the evidence that police have collected, including some writings on a website called Goodreads, book reviews, where he reportedly reviewed the Ted Kaczynski Unabomber manifesto. What did that say?
Well, that's exactly right. So there's a whole host of things that investigators right now that they have time, right? So the focus the last 5-6 days has been on who is this person? Can we get them? Well, that's now solved, and this individual's been charged. So they have the advantage to go back and say, okay, now that we know who it is, what's their online footprint? And exactly to your point, they've got all sorts of information that he has posted online before, or it is sometimes even more helpful. What are their accounts? What are the things that they're reading? And what are they opining on? And in this particular instance, he's talking about the Unabomber and his thoughts on the Unabomber. So that's one of the things that they're looking into as they try to make sure, is this in fact his account? And then what does this mean? Does it help us with motive, or does it help us understand? And could we be looking at other people in the future that want to do what he wants to do? And one of those things that they've been looking at also is a photo of a spine that has screws in it. And so is that his spine? Was that somebody else's spine? Is that another type of thing that could have helped fuel this? So I think when we look at this, it's going to take a while to sort through all of that. That work we know is ongoing, and we're reporting that. So we're just going to have to see, I think, in the coming couple of days where this all goes. One of the downsides of him being in the New York court system is that they typically don't put a lot of that information in their charging documents. So that's going to be a bit of a challenge for us. Normally, if this was in the federal system, even in Pennsylvania, we might get a lot more information as far as what they were uncovering as it pertains to motive, should they want to introduce that in the charges in New York State. Unfortunately, just the way that the law is, has nothing to do with the Manhattan District Attorney's Office. It's going to be a challenge.
And Clint, the New York Times actually has some additional reporting on this spinal X-ray that's been circulating online, or at least related potentially to that. And here's what they report out. Mangione was in regular contact with friends and family until about 6 months ago, when he suddenly and inexplicably stopped communicating with them. He had been suffering from a painful back injury, friends said, and then went dark. A friend told the New York Times that his spine was kind of misaligned, and quote, he said his lower vertebrae were almost like a half-inch off, and I think it pinched a nerve, end quote. How significant is this?
I think it's quite significant for two reasons. One, it may point to motive and why UnitedHealth, why this direction. Even if you look at the other evidence that might be out there in the open source, nothing really points to healthcare. So that's one dimension of it that might be looked at. The other is the dimension that Catherine was talking about, which is what was his mental health status? If he's in persistent pain, would that contribute to this, or maybe put him in a different psychological state?
And I also just have to come back to the fact that he'd been on the run for days, and it seemed like it was unclear which state even he was in. We know there were authorities in Georgia where we thought he may have, boarded a bus, because that's where a ticket had originated, to New York City. They ultimately tracked him down at this McDonald's in Pennsylvania. Catherine, your thoughts on just how he was eventually caught?
Well, it was by chance, because really they didn't track him down. He was having, food at McDonald's, and someone there, because of the photo that was spread all over nationwide TV and social media, saw him. So that's how they got very fortunate, because, as they say, someone saw something and said something, and that's why they got very lucky. And also, he clearly was not hiding. He wasn't going back to Hawaii. He was walking around. The reason why we have a clear photo of him is because he pulled down his mask, and that's why we were able to get a clear photo of him when he was at the hospital.
And Gary reported out, Tom, about the gun that was found on him when they arrested him in Pennsylvania. Authorities talked about a ghost gun, potential 3D printer involved. What more are we learning about the murder weapon?
Right. So when we say a ghost gun, we mean a gun that is not manufactured by a company that is registered with the federal government. So in other words, it doesn't have a serial number. It's not from a licensed firearms manufacturer. It's a ghost because it doesn't exist in the federal system. So they can be made a number of different ways. Sometimes people buy a number of parts for guns and assemble them. In other instances, we see people use 3D printers, and that there have been some diagrams in the past and some things online about how to make these. One, they're notoriously unreliable, which might explain the reason why the gun jammed in the course of if this alleged homicide that he's committed. So that's the first thing. Second thing is, did he make it himself? If he didn't make it himself, did somebody else make it? In which case, that person could also be on the hook for charges as well. So that's something, a question today that we're going to be closely tracking, but not specific to this crime. This is an issue that law enforcement has been very concerned about for the last several years, the proliferation of these type of weapons and how difficult it makes it, and the fact that, it's difficult to trace where these are coming from and how many of them there are, and the fact that somebody could not have to go to a store and buy this gun. Right. They would have had a hard time if they had a name to be able to run that name and say, oh, did he ever purchase a weapon? Because then that might help them solve this crime. So in other words, if they had a name before this person called it in from McDonald's, they would have checked that name, said, oh, in fact, they did purchase a gun. Hey, they purchased almost the exact gun that we see on that camera. That would have really helped them out. But in this case, it wouldn't have helped them out because this gun is not registered at all. So I just wanted to explain why that and kind of underscore why that's a problem in this particular case.